Welcome to part 5 of this advanced esoteric concepts and spiritual awakening topics called Electrification and Etherization. This is our part 5, so we're going to just do a tiny little summary just so that everybody can catch up if you haven't watched the previous workshops. We are now more than 10 hours in, and this is what it really takes when you want to understand some of these spiritual topics that are floating around. You have to really go through these topics, not just from a knowledge seeking perspective, but also from a perspective of trying to feel and experience, internalizing the knowledge. That's why these parts are 2-3 weeks apart, so that you can really work with this information that is coming in these workshops. Now, the resurrection body is probably a new term for most of you guys, but maybe not so much. The Buddhists call it the diamond body. New Age calls it the light body or the ascension body. Rudolf Steiner calls it the glorified etheric body or enlightened body, if you will. And what it means in its essence is really the energy body. In other words, the holistic body of us humans, not just the physical, not just the emotional, not just the intellectual, the mental, but also including the consciousness soul, the consciousness body, the spiritual identity that we talked about in part 4. Yeah, so the fourfold human body is basically a conscious body in which a person can master their thinking, their emoting, and their willing through self-mastery and self-healing, and therefore becomes initiated in the spiritual realms of basically the next higher spiritual hierarchy. That's kind of like how this goes, if you will. I'm a martial artist, as you know, and for me, this way of thinking is very natural. Even you start as a white belt, you're a martial artist. You just don't know a lot of the techniques, and you haven't really been initiated in the purpose of these techniques and so forth. You can, of course, know a lot about them. Yes, reading or watching others doing it, but it's a whole different level when you have to learn how to condition your body, how to condition your emotions, or recondition, I want to say. It's a new structure that you are introducing to your body, a new way of holding your body, including your emotional makeup and your way of thinking. And therefore, this idea of, a sort of leveling up with time through experience and wisdom is a very natural, picture in my head. So I never really understood why New Age made it such an accomplishment, to was so special to have an ascension body. And martial arts, you learn that it really is just a matter of you doing it. Okay, and the longer you do it, and the more dedication and tenacity you have, the better you're gonna get. There's no mystery to it, and you have to stay at a certain degree. So after you go through different color belts, you become a black belt, and then there's multiple degrees of black belts, the highest being the 10th degree, and you have to stay a certain amount of years in each of these degrees. So it does not just depend on how good you are as a martial artist, but also for how long you've been there. All right, so that's sort of my simple imagery here for you. Yeah, when we're talking about ascension, when we're talking about, us sort of developing further, which has been made possible, through our entire collective, and the according masters in each of these different epochs that came into to to master these whatever nth degree black belt techniques and show them to us. We build our glorified etheric body or resurrection body every single day through the way we live, choose, and will, which includes, all our feelings, all our sentiments, all our thoughts, all our words, all our actions. Why? Because they create an energetic reality. They create what, as a spiritual scientist, I would say, an etheric substance. And that's reflected back to us in the quality of our feelings, in the quality of our energy or life force energy, right? In, the ability to master our life through our will, not as in solar plexus will, but as in, well, it is linked to the solar plexus, but not as in the will that controls things, but the will that is actually able to act, like say, above desire, drive, instincts, conditioning, and addictions. Yeah, that's what we call the will. Okay, this is where you make a conscious choice. A conscious choice is called will. All right. So, how does this energetic reality reflect in our life through the quality of our feelings, our life force, energy, also to a degree through our physical, yeah, like the healthiness of our physical, the radiance, yeah, through our attuned will and our emotional intelligence, our ability to collaborate, to share, to connect with other people, and our ability to freely think. That's how this occurs. In the beginning, in part one, I think I called it spiritualization. So we spiritualize ourselves. Okay. So this happens without us actually doing it. We're not doing it. You can't make it yourself uh, etherize. It's an alchemical process that occurs spontaneously within yourself if the quality of your energy, the consciousness, and the inner harmony that you have with yourself, if that aligns correctly. Yeah. Then it's really much more of an understanding that this is our natural progression. So if you keep going, and this includes all of you guys, all right, you're all gonna be illuminated at some point. Yeah. So maybe not in this lifetime. Maybe there's no way of telling that, because there are some things that you can carry over from previous lifetimes, and that's what makes this quite interesting. And this is also the reason why I chose this topic today, because I really wanted you to understand the connection with the afterlife. Yeah, so there's a huge sort of sort of popular knowledge, new age knowledge out there, most of which derives sort of from a halfway Eastern tradition, but only halfway really. And there are some things that are left out, or some things some key elements that are not acknowledged. So once more, if we look at our human consciousness, our human soul development, we have to understand that there is an overall development throughout the history of humans, which means that our entire collective is growing in consciousness, is growing spiritually. Yeah, so we have our individual spiritual growth, our individual spiritual identity that we talked about last time. And then we have the collective development. And the collective development is basically sort of the overall surrounding. So if you want to picture this, like technology, for example. Yeah, so nowadays we have internet, we have, streaming platforms, we have all kinds of cool gadgets that we can use to make our life easier and more convenient to connect from farther distances. We take those things for granted nowadays. This isn't your particular, your personal accomplishment. Yeah, it's something that our society has developed. I'm almost 60 years old, so I was there, when the first, World Wide Web and file transfer networks and so forth when they started. And I can tell you that this has, you know, literally changed the way we not only access, but also how we exchange information. And, well, as we can see right now, also how we spread, how we transfer information. Yeah, so this is a collective development technology. I'm not saying that the development of technology, tech, high tech, or whatever you want to call this, is um, necessarily the same as spiritual development. Not at all, as you guys know. But I think for a simplification, for taking all this, the specialness out of it, it's really important for us to understand that when there are collective developments that happen over time, well, number one, we can't really take credits for it. But number two, they create a sort of a backwind force. They're supportive, all right? Whenever something reaches mainstream, then it becomes more easily accessible for everybody. And I think it's fair to say, especially since many of you guys come from these times, or were there when there was no internet, um, that we've all benefited from this in one way or another. But we've also been there at a time where spirituality was basically beginning to reach a sort of a, I've got to be careful now what I'm saying. I was going to say a mainstream awareness, but really not. And, if you compare it to previous eras, where everybody had to believe in God or had to believe in whatever the current deity or whatever the current sort of spiritual framework was. So what I meant to say was, with those of us who've been around for a while, yeah, that most of these topics that we're talking about today, those weren't really things that you could have addressed 20 or 30 years ago, at least not as easily. Yeah, you could have mentioned them, and I wrote about them at this time, but there really weren't many people that had anything, really to say about this or ask questions, because it was still just something that you studied if you studied theology maybe, or philosophy. Now you would have read these texts, you would have studied them. But because of the internet and because of the way we communicate nowadays, um, this is possible for all of us. And suddenly, you can hear our children or grandchildren talk about karma and chakras and all these yoga terms and crystals and energy healing and so forth. So I don't want to go into like whether or not they're used correctly. This is not uh, the topic of today. How, for example, New Age misconfigured or transfigured some of that knowledge. But I want you to really stay in that open mindset. Yeah, that all these different spiritual developments that we've had over the centuries, the millennia, Yeah, that they represented sort of the developmental stage of that era. And with each of these collective accomplishments, if you want to say, the whole of humanity started to develop in new directions or started to adopt new frameworks. So here in the 21st century, we're at a point where, and I've mentioned this before, where we can see that there's a new age or sort of a popular spirituality that is quite pervasive in, like, especially for younger people. Then we also see a really strong sort of distrust or even aversion toward the church. And on the other hand, we see a strong rise of spiritual cults and groupings. So there's something going on. If we look at our daily lives now more than ever before are almost exclusively geared toward materialism. When I say materialism, I'm not just talking about money or material gains. I'm also talking about the view of ourselves as humans. Yeah, starting with how human life is defined. Yeah, as a sort of an electromagnetic impulse. Yeah, legally, that is the case. Medically, that is the case. Um, and so, we see ourselves as this material body, yeah, that has a certain expiration date, has to deal with the sort of the psychic pain of knowing that, nothing lasts forever. And at the same time, there's large corporations and movements that are trying to develop technology that allows us to, sort of connect our consciousness or access our consciousness in the material, connected with the material, yeah, uploaded to computers or whatever to preserve it. So, in other words, the whole discussion of spirituality, guys, is really mostly about the afterlife. It's about, having some kind of framework of what happens when we die, because this is, our pet peeve, okay? Yeah, we have the awareness that informs us that we're going to die one day. Yeah, animals don't have that, and so they don't suffer from it, but we do. And so we have to come to terms with this. Some, cynicists say that this is the reason why religions exist, yeah, to give people a way to process or to, to trick their minds into, overcoming the fear of death. Um, I strongly disagree with that. I have actually investigated that quite a bit. And anyone, anthropologists, for example, can confirm this to you that for as long as humans existed, there was a need to spiritually to connect with something higher than ourselves. This very unique to humans. There's, um, this like really desire to understand ourselves and to make sense of our journey. And, from my perspective, spirituality really is nothing but a way for us to understand ourselves better. Yeah? Whether we tie this in with the afterlife or not is secondary. Now, if we do tie it in with the afterlife, then something I said here a few minutes ago becomes quite relevant, namely, if is there something like a carryover? Can we carry over information from this lifetime to the next? Well, we can, but that depends on our level of consciousness. All right, so there's some work that needs to be done. If we live a life, an unconscious life, guys, then really what happens is that there's not much that evolved, okay, in a lifetime, and therefore, there's no real, need in the spiritual realm to retain anything of that. And so, an unconscious life is then more or less assimilated into the greater spiritual realm. And then when we get reborn, if you believe in something like reincarnation, you just start from fresh. Yeah, you get you get your fresh body and you get an ego for free, as I always say, and start over again. Try to you know rise gradually out of your mind to the physical, the desires, the instincts, the drives, and your emotional, your addictions, your obsessions and so forth, and your mind, your ruminating and your critical mind and your anxiety, to get into a place of more sort of conscious spiritual understanding. And in that case, your conscious has evolved during your lifetime, and therefore, yeah, gets, I think I've called this metabolized. There's an alchemical process that happens in which then sort of this experience and all the things that we have internalized throughout our lifetime gets transubstantiated. It gets turned into etheric matter, and this etheric matter then um, transforms into astral matter, and basically gets, you know, um, retained in this way. And this is then why we can have reincarnations from masters and stuff like that. Probably heard about this before. Yeah, that's why, for example, the Dalai Lama is seen as a very old soul that keeps coming back, just picks new bodies. All right, because at a master level, um, it is possible for you to not only retain, your spiritual identity, but also, basically to pick your next body. I always tell you guys that you're sort of picking your life, and that your higher self is sort of picking, your karmic circumstances, your karmic load, your parents, and all that family constellation for a good reason. So to a degree, that happens anyway. But I do want to point out that an unconscious life, and this is something that we will discuss in the last part, in part 6, what actually happens when a soul devolves, when it goes backwards, and is it, are there things like soulless bodies, are there things like zombies out there and things like that? Yes, they do exist from a spiritual point of view. Again, we have to understand it. From a spiritual point of view, you have a physical body and a person can talk and walk and all that, but spiritually, there's not much going on, and that is such an unconscious life. Yeah, that is someone who has not really developed, nor actually that has a desire to do that. And that is something, just on the side note here, that parallel to seeing more and more awakening conscious soul selves, we also see more and more soulless or unconscious souls incarnating. So this is quite interesting, and I hope that you guys have a lot of questions about all these topics that I just sort of mixed together just to, for the sake of an intro here, and uh, start out with some questions for you. So when I give all these sort of really fast summaries, okay, this can be quite intimidating, but we left off with the understanding of, or with a sort of an introduction into the spiritual hierarchy. So, and this is a very, very old knowledge. This has been developed roughly 5,000 years ago, guys. If you believe it or not, spiritual science is a very old science, much older than nature science. Nature science is about 300, 350 years old. Spiritual science is about 6,000 years old. Okay, so there's this understanding that we have, I know, these other realms um, outside of us, and that with our development, that there is sort of an ascension, um, uh, a curing. Okay, um, very much so comparable, like with martial arts, as I mentioned earlier. It doesn't change our, who we are outside and things like that. It changes our spiritual makeup, yeah, who we are from within. Now, I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to ask questions here and not just consume, this kind of information, whether it's the spiritual hierarchies or the fourfold human body. All right. Would anybody like to initiate a conversation here? Yeah, like through questions or through comments. Um, I know that you guys must have read things before because you often refer to certain words, and then sometimes I ask you to clarify or to explain them. There's a lot of people, especially in spiritual groups, who use a lot of terms without actually differentiating them. So if you would like to use this opportunity right now, you guys are very good at sending me questions privately. And you guys all know I love answering questions, but this does not allow others to participate. And I will only really volunteer this kind of knowing and knowledge if it comes through questioning. Any comments, questions, or conversations that you would like to start at this point before we go into the details of the resurrection body and the etherization of the blood? Hi, Jared.
Yeah, you've touched on a couple of things there that it certainly interests me, and one was the soulless bodies. The habitation of bodies incarnate now that are soulless potentially. At the same time as the consciousness of the planet and of humanity is rising, it seems to be a part of the splitting of humanity as well, I guess. And the other thing that you touched on was what happens to souls when they devolve. Um, what happens to that? I mean, we're taught about heaven and hell, and that's pretty much all we really understand about it in the context of growing up in the West. But we don't really have any further. We've touched a lot on heaven and what happens after you die and the etherization process, but we haven't really touched on what happens when somebody devolves. So yeah, that was the second part that interested me.
Okay, both parts that you just mentioned, I just said that we're going to cover that in the last part, in part 6.
Oh
Okay?
yeah, you did too. Sorry, I'm
Yeah,
jumping
yeah.
ahead. Yeah.
No, it's totally fine. But, because if there is an above, then there is also a below. That's something that you probably already figured out, that there always is a give and take. Okay, nothing comes out of nothing. Things have to come from somewhere and they have to go somewhere. Yeah, and the same applies to the spirit realm. Okay, so yes, we will cover that when we talk about electrification. Yeah, I've mentioned this in the beginning parts. Yeah, electrification stands for the devolution and etherization for the evolution of the human body, if you will, the holistic human body. So today we're covering the evolution part and how the etherization occurs. I'm a little bit surprised that you said we've talked a lot about the etherization. I don't think we did. Maybe we did, in the Energy Training Club, because that's what the Energy Training Club is for.
Yeah,
But
I think that's actually what I meant. Yeah, we're not that
mhm.
we've actually talked about it and discussed the processes, but that we're going through that kind of experience in the Energy Training Club. Yeah, sorry, I should have clarified.
No, no, you don't need to apologize. It's something that everybody here watching this or participating here needs to understand that there's obviously, within the sacred self-healing community, a more active part, a more active group that constantly does energy sessions and readings and discussions, like what 2-3 times a week. Okay, so those are natural events where questions like this come up, where commentary gets discussed and so forth. So if that is something that you want to, experience, then you need to look into the Energy Training Club. That's an ongoing study group, if you will, but not through study, through reading things, although reading is part of it, but through actually, harmonizing our inner experience with our intellect through energy sessions in which we do both live at the same time. And for those of you who are specifically interested in the development of their astral body, their alignment to Christ and grace, and we have the Grace Training Club, and those in the Energy Training Club are automatically also members in the Grace Training Club. So basically, the way this works, guys, is that um, have to train these all these bodies in you, your physical, your etheric, your astral, and your consciousness at the same time in order to reach a level of coherence, where these kind of concepts really, really make sense, even if you have never heard about it before. Who of you experiences this at times that they listen to me and there's a lot of terms and lingo words and so forth in there, but somehow intuitively understands or feels like a knowing in them? Who of you has that sometimes? That you kind of don't really know exactly what it means, but it feels, I guess, familiar, or it feels like there's something to this. Who would like to share?
Jona? Hi, it's
Yes.
Janet. Can you hear
Hi,
me?
Janet. Yeah, I hear
Hi.
you. It's so good to hear too. It's so good to hear you. I'm glad you made it.
Thank you. Um, well, since nobody else is talking about this, I'll just, my experience right now is one, I'm still not clear about what etherization is. Like,
And you shouldn't, because
not,
today is the day where we talk about it. Hmm.
okay.
I mean, not shouldn't,
I
but
kind of, I
you
kind
couldn't.
of, kind of
Yeah.
guessed it. I haven't obsessed my brain about thinking about it, although it probably, let me just say this. Thinking about etherization and the conversations here might be a really good use of my brain sometimes when it wants to, like lately, it's just wanting to wander off because of so many things going on. And I think sometimes thinking about these terms, what I'm addressing is like the feeling like you're talking about, and then it connecting to uh, the language and the verbiage
Hmm.
and the vocabulary used in our discussions. So, okay, great, etherization. I'm interested in learning about it. There's part of
Nice.
me that goes, Janet, why are you getting on this? How is etherization more important than doing some of these basic life things today? And I said, I don't know, but I'll get on to the meeting. So I
Okay.
came.
So very
It's a
nice.
bit of a conflict from the material to sitting and learning about this. And with that, it's this kind of the same thing. I get a feeling, and it's really good about what happens energetically. Uh, there's an internal learning.
Hmm.
However, sometimes I feel like if I get into one of the meditation, self healing meditation groups and stuff like that, that sometimes the information keeps going around in circles, just because of how much vocabulary is, how much
Hmm.
intellectual reference. And this isn't a criticism of it. I just find sometimes uh, it interferes a little bit with what I feel like
I find this a
could
very
be
good
more
point.
expansive. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's all. And
Yeah,
so,
It's a really, really good prompt because we have to answer that question. Why are we even talking about etherization? What's the purpose of this? Like, how can we apply this? Yeah, and why are we even interested in this? And this is just sort of a brain fart. Are we just going out there into nowhere land and getting stuck there in the rabbit hole? Or is there actually a framework behind that that can help us understand ourselves better? So I take that prompt, Janet, and I'll give you a quick answer here, just real quick, because we're going to talk about how to build our glorified etheric body, how to build our essential body here in a moment, but which is the equivalent to saying, like etherizing ourselves. The quick answer is there's nothing more important than your life's experience. Okay, nothing. So the theoretical knowledge of etherization, how this actually occurs, is irrelevant because it would happen without the knowledge. Okay, it would happen without the knowledge. And now we must ask, well, how does this happen? Well, it happens bit by bit, thought by thought, sensation by sensation, yeah, every single day through the way we live, choose, and will, through the way we act. Each thought, each sentiment, each attitude, each feeling, word, or action creates an energetic reality. You guys already know that. And Janet, I know that you don't just intellectually know that. I know that you're experiencing that too. And uh, on top of that is the overall attunement. Yeah, so people can be very congruent. We often talk about congruence, as sort of the prerequisite for us even being able to make conscious choices. Because if we're incongruent within, if we're split within, if we're conflicted within, we can't make any conscious choices. In, we're not we're not mastering our life. We feel that our life is happening to us. Yeah, so that only on a side note. So for as long as we're still struggling with, you know, ruminating thoughts and, not being able to, withstand the desires, the lusts and the greeds and the, all those kind of impulses that come in through the physical world. We're not, nowhere near an etherization, chemically spoken, okay, because your body isn't attuned enough. So I know what this sounds like, but really you got to understand what it means. Okay, what it means is that you learn to master your those different realms of yourself. Yeah, the physical, okay, by everything concerning nutrition, exercise, how to stay healthy physically. This is there is a study involved in this, and there is a gaining knowledge involved in this. Yeah, especially nowadays where most of the mainstream media works against, sort of common sense, if you will. And you got to be able to, handle your own emotions. You got to, be able to master big emotions and to go a step further and be able to create calm and inner peace. You have to be able to do that. I'm not talking sort of Taoist type of peace. I'm just talking like when you go through something that is really stressful or that is really overwhelming, then you got to be able, to center yourself, to ground yourself, and to feel for yourself. And then further intellectually, you have to be able to, you know, think for yourself. You can't have your thoughts thinking you and identify with your mind unchecked. No, that's not attuned. There is no I in any of that if you are not at least, trying to master those aspects of yourself. And that's where self-healing comes in, because self-healing is basically the path of self-mastery, if you will, triggered by some underlying pain or crisis or trauma, if you will. Yeah, so we all here in the Sacred Self Healing community, you know, because we have something that came to our awareness that needs to be self healed. And as we are illuminating, those aspects of ourselves that need to be healed, our job is to understand where they come from. Yeah. What is the issue, the underlying issue here? And I'm not talking about, childhood trauma and your parents and life is so hard. I'm not talking about the psychological stuff. All right. We all have those conditions to contend with. I'm talking about what is underneath my severe lack of self-love and self-care. What is underneath my, severe fear of big emotions? That what is my what's underneath, my codependency? What's underneath my addiction? What's underneath, my constant ruminating and identifying with my thoughts? Even though I know that 80% of my thoughts aren't even mine. Yeah, what's underneath, my spiritual consumption, or also rejection. What's underneath my issue with connecting with love and people? What's underneath that? So you see, uh, self-healing is just the beginning of a path, but a path that um, attunes all your different energy bodies, to your higher self, if you will. Yeah, and the higher self is nothing but the higher potential of yourself. Yeah, and what is the higher potential of yourself? That is the ether. That is the resurrection body, the glorified ether body. Okay, so Janet here just gave you a framework. Okay. There's nothing more important than every single thought, every single choice and action and sentiment and even word in life. Nothing more important because that's how everything happens. Okay. We also need to
Well, also,
allow.
oh,
Mhm.
sorry.
No, the
Well,
alignment. I
from what,
just wanted to point at the alignment. That's important too because you can align yourself to evil deeds or to dark forces and be very good at that. Um, but that's not going to lead to etherization. Hmm. Good.
what I started to get an answer to the question of why to show up, and that was three simple things. Was one, it's an awareness of expanding somebody's a place for discussion because we don't talk about this at the local fruit stand every day when I go buy my oranges. I mean, in some ways, it's down to earth talking, but it's a realization of connecting and uh, identifying that this is a valuable experience and stepping out of, because like you were just saying at the very end of what you were mentioning, this growth in the higher self isn't walking around going, well, that's just how I am. I don't like to show up for meetings and I don't like to do this kind of stuff. It's living in that space, that energy of saying, well, whatever, it is part of who I am. But also, it also coming to something like this, when you were talking about it, learning about what etherization is, which is already starting to form an understanding for me. It's like some people don't know like what their liver does or where
Hmm.
their kidneys are,
Most people don't.
and
Hmm.
and so it's just another learning of being responsible for ourselves, learning
Yep.
about another part of ourselves in a very practical manner that makes a huge amount of sense if one's going to take responsibility for oneself, is to learn these things. Why depend
100%.
on the doctor? You can go to the library and get a medical book and you can read it and say, oh, that's my tibia, that's my fibia, that's my fibula, that's how many bones are in my hand, how many teeth do I have. We're
Yeah, you can
walking
still
around
go
with
to
the
the
stuff
doctor.
all the time. Yeah,
You
you
can
can still
still
go
go
to
to
the
a doctor,
doctor.
and have an actually informed discussion with your doctor about it.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So
So
those things, I answered, answering the question of, and being able to say when you're doing stuff like what you mentioned too, is to be conscious of why I'm doing anything in life in general, so that these thoughts that come in, perhaps that aren't mine, you can start to question, well, why, not that sad why, but that, well, why am I doing this now? Start to get conscious about these choices.
yeah.
So those, I got some answers, and it's good.
No, it's very nice, and I love how you rephrase things into your language. Not only does it show how you're internalizing it, but it also helps others listening to hear things in a different way. That's why discussions are so important, and that's why I encourage you guys to ask questions and comment, okay? Because this is really vital that we don't uh, just sort of take things because I said so or because somebody wrote it. Okay, it's about us really ingesting it and feeling into it and paraphrasing and rephrasing, like what we understand. Okay, that's where the learning occurs. That's where it really happens. And really, all you said, Janet, was what I called earlier, trying to make sense of what we're experiencing, of our experience here. Yeah, and trying to understand ourselves better. And self mastery then is, a step farther than that. It's a conscious development towards something. Yeah. First, maybe just understanding, how your body works so that you understand why you're gaining weight. Yeah, like simple um, process, really. If you want to understand why you're gaining weight, okay, even though you didn't change your diet or whatever, okay, you're gonna have to educate yourself a little bit on how this even works, yeah, in your body, and then you can make more conscious choices. It's the same with, all the emotional processes that you go through, like why does what my parents say to me, even though I'm an adult, still hit me really hard? Yeah, why does things that come from specific people or that come from people that I have a certain opinion about, why do these things provoke me or make me more defensive than other people? These are things that we want to understand. Yeah, they link into inner child, they link into trauma, they link into these emotional processes, and the processing in our emotional intelligence. Yeah, how to work with our own emotions and how to not act out and not project our emotions, but to actually work with them. And again, this happens through us educating ourselves about these things, like I do here in the Sacred Self-Healing Community. Be it, the developmental stages as a child, be it, trauma, pain, addictions, and so forth. Yeah, those are all things that we all experience, and we have to kind of, brush up on our knowledge, just like you said about anatomy, to better understand how this even works in us, yeah, so that we don't constantly question ourselves, yeah, or think we're crazy or um, you know, uh, are too susceptible from the outside, from what other people think about us or how they see us. Yeah, so the same then for our intellectual development, yeah, where we at some point in our life realize that all the knowledge in this world doesn't really do anything. Okay, we have to kind of act it, we have to live it, we have to embody it, we have to express ourselves. Yeah, if we are, you know, a genius and let's say like a human computer know everything, but have no way of mastering human communication, it does not serve us at all. Okay. And lastly, the same with the spiritual development, yeah, the development of our spiritual identity that cannot occur without us at some point asking questions and investigating things and learning more. Okay. And the desire for learning more and the desire for understanding things better, that is ultimately this God spark in us. You guys got to understand this. Yeah. If you look into nature, you will see that evolution as a concept, yeah, as a concept, not only for the survival of species, but as a concept for, nature itself, the universe itself, life itself evolving, then through, constant adjustment, constant, um, adaptation and so forth. Yeah, then you see what it actually is that makes you want to come to workshops like this. Okay. Yeah, this is the God spark in you that inspires you to wanting to know more. That's that. And that's a good thing. All right. And there's no point in judging other people if they don't feel that, because you will feel it exactly at that moment when you're ready to ingest that kind of knowledge. And then, typically also, encouraged by inner experiences. So you have experiences. That's usually how this goes. Sorry, guys, I'm a little distracted here. I don't know if you can see this, but my computer is finding this has to do here with the thunderstorm. Let me see if I can just switch my powers. Oh, just get zapped. Yeah, does this make sense? So the striving for knowledge is part of your developing spirit. The desire to wanting you understand yourself, which then leads to spiritual inquiry, is basically spirit in action in you. Yeah, that is already your, spirit, part of your spiritual expression. It is basically the beginning of your etherization, if you will. Yay. Could everybody follow this?
Yeah, Jona, I was feeling something the other day where, like understanding that we have experiences and we have, pain, trauma, and we're experiencing all that until there comes a point in time where I can feel my dropping in, why is this happening, and having that question, and then dropping in deeper to the self and feeling my heart, and then finding the answers to those questions from within of like, oh, things are on repeat, and until I break out, until I gather my inner experience and understanding that I can break free. And then I had this thing the other day, like everything is backwards, because I think then I get to a point where it flips and I go, oh, I find my heart, I feel my spirit, I feel what's coming forward, and I feel that connection. And then all of a sudden something will hit me from left field, or I'll have an experience, or something will come up in my life where it's like a mirror, like it's showing me something. And because I'm feeling that it's backwards, what comes up for me that appears is then something that is a construct of something on my ego or my mind and my part of my karmic journey. And it's for me to undo it. Like, it gives me the opportunity to see the construct that I've created and the way I can undo it and pull it down and let it go, and see that it's just something that I've believed in or focused on that isn't like an error perception, that is something. And once I've undone it, I'm like, oh my God, and it's like another layer drops away. And to me, that's how feeling that things are backwards, whereas maybe in the past it's all been like, I'm tossed in a sea of trauma, pain, and I feel like things are happening to me. And now feeling, after I've been on that journey, to be able to come back to center and go, no, I feel my heart, and things will arise as I need to undo them, and it sort of clears the way. It clears a path to sort of
Yeah,
creating my own experience and creating that's, I don't know, that's just something that I thought.
you're still using words, even when you describe that you have your own experience. I'm trying to find a slide here um, that hint at, sort of an external life view. However, the way you just described this, Julian, really shows that you're not alone. So there's something else working there. Okay. Um, what you described to me is nothing but karma. Okay.
Mm,
So
yeah,
on
yeah.
one hand, obviously you rise your consciousness through study, through self healing, and self mastery, and so forth. And on the other hand, you get to have your own more sort of individualized insights, yeah, and that then helps you to dissolve things. It helps you to overcome them. You're still using words and terminology though that makes this look like it's coming in from the outside. When you use the way you use the word backwards, okay, still shows a sort of that there's some kind of predetermined life plan in the background, and that your life's only purpose is, suffering and healing from the suffering. This is a
Mm,
very common New Age misunderstanding. Okay.
okay. To the
Yes.
to the point of undoing, to the point of like, then when I've got that part, when I, it's sort of like, then it's into the next step. It's into
Yeah, it
then
always
create.
works that way. Yeah, it always
Mm,
works that way. It's obviously very complex.
mm,
We work through, the physical, and when I say physical, I don't just mean body. I mean everything in the material world. You know, the emotional and mental, the astral and the etheric reality of ourselves, depending on what our understanding is, and they all intertwine. But not all of them, but they do affect one another. Okay, so we have, the physical, the material world, which can be penetrated by the etheric, okay, via our endocrine system. And you are a doctor of acupuncture, so I'm giving you very useful information here. And then we have our astral body, which is where all our desires and our feelings are stored, that penetrates our etheric body.
mm,
And when you say backwards, okay, what you say is basically predetermination. Okay, predetermination is basically the core or the root cause of all suffering. Okay, so this is a major part of what we have to overcome, or what we seek to undo,
yeah.
what we seek to overcome, because predetermination means that something or somebody, even if it's our higher self, in the beginning, sort of arbitrarily, it's okay to have that imagery, yeah,
Mm,
of the higher self determining things for you, simply because that's an improvement to it. The world is all bad and everybody's out to get me, and the evil forces are, punishing me, or God is punishing me. Yeah, so to recontextualize this as your higher self working for you, which is much more accurate. Yeah, because it is like that. Um, but just not in the way we think, not in this externalized way. All this happens in accordance with us. We're just not aware of it. So the uh, the solution here to your problem, which I hear is the repetitive nature of things and the
mm,
layers, and how they intertwine, is that you become more aware of it. Okay, as simple as that. Okay, yeah, if you've learned something and it keeps repeating, then there's something that not actually investigating. That doesn't mean that we have to like become psychic detectives and analyze everything and over process things, but you know, uh, and this is not addressed to you here, Julie, and to most of you, I just want to let you know. I mean, I'm not being cynical here, but if I take the majority of my clients, 90% of their issues are repetitive. Repetitive.
Yeah, well,
Nothing new.
and it's once I recognize the repetitive nature, it's sort of like that's the moment where we're feeling into it is like coming back to the center and away. What arises from I don't know how to put it. What arises from that is actually understanding, getting through things quickly to become
Right.
then more
Well,
creative, to be the
that's how.
creator. So it's undoing all those constructs. I'm just talking about like from the beginning and from the beginning of my life, pain, then the repetitions, and then
Mhm.
understanding that it's a connection to our heart. This is sort of what I was feeling into yesterday. That is backwards. Is that usually we just have the pain and the stuff that's happening to us, and we never even think,
Mhm.
well, to go into the heart and to feel that spiritual self and the soul, and actually have a connection and a communication with that part of me until it gets so bad that that is what brings that out, I suppose, but rather
Yeah,
than
but
being a
some people it's the opposite. So it's half and half. Some people get wrapped up in the preconceptions of what it is that they're experiencing, the mental, the etheric experience, and some people get wrapped up in the astral experience of what is happening to them, the feeling level of it.
yeah,
So uh,
the feeling,
really, the
emotion.
key is, and this is like a really fundamental core part of my teachings for you, without using any of these deeper esoteric lingo words, or any particular uh, spiritual traditions, is the heart mind. Yeah, is bringing that together, and in the most simple way, that is the key to everything.
Yeah,
Okay.
otherwise I'm working things out from my ego. So before it would be like my ego mind, which is not connected to my heart mind, is actually looking at the problems. Oh, this, I'll solve it this way, I'll fix it this way. That was how things happened in the past.
Yeah. So the ego is, let's just we're shifting perspectives here, guys, and you have to really, again, stop externalizing things, whether it's your higher self or your ego. Okay, they're both part of you. Okay, you get the ego for free. That is your insurance policy. That's your first way of just dealing with being alive here in this physical body. Okay, yeah, like you say, coping, fixing. Just tagging along, surviving life. You get that for free. It isn't until the spiritual investigation, or the investigation of self, self-awareness, self-reflection, and so forth starts, which is the onset of consciousness, okay, that you even become able to see things such as truth, yeah, and become able to discern truth. So the discernment of truth, okay, is basically where you're no longer in your ego. As soon as the 200 on the Hawkins scale, as soon as you cross that boundary, you are no longer acting from your ego or thinking from your ego. It's as simple as that. So your ego is a proxy. It's a placeholder for your I, for your spiritual identity, until it naturally develops. Does this make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
And until then, you will have an externalized life view,
Mm.
because the ego can only perceive it as that. So when it comes to us really working with these things, it is, and this is often expressed through our language. It is essential for us to observe how we see life and ourselves in it, or how we see the world and ourselves in it. For as long as we're externalizing life, right, we're bound to our ego, period. Because that's the ego's way of seeing life. It's a placeholder. It just occupies the space that's an actual space until the I starts to emerge. And where does this happen? In your heart. You're correct. But without, further training of, let me pull up the scale of consciousness because that shows it very clearly. Without further training, all these disciplines of the heart, such as trying, understanding, compassion, forgiveness, empathy, and so forth, your heart is not trained enough to merge with your mind. Okay, let me see. Where do we have the scale of consciousness here? Okay, let me repeat this. So it's not enough to just say, oh, and now, I realize that I've been in my mind all my life, and now I realize I have to switch everything to the heart. That is what a lot of people do. Okay, go to the other extreme. Okay, so we spent a long time in our life in those places where we experience our inner extremes. Yeah, I usually call this conflictions. This is a split. Yeah, we experience our self as partially our mind and partially our heart. Hang on, can you guys all see this right now? Yes. So let me just review what I just said earlier. I said, until you reach this kind of level of consciousness here where you can actually, and when I say can, it's the ability to discern truth means, you can investigate things. You can ask questions. You know how to get to the truth of things. Okay. This is, by the way, a really, really important alignment in you. Yeah, the alignment to the spirit of truth, which esoterically, is nothing but the sacred heart. That's why I start the Sacred Self-Healing course with step 1, the sacred heart. That's the alignment to the spirit of truth. Because right there, you might think it's all about lovey-doveyness, but it really isn't. This has to do with asking for truth, aligning yourself to the spirit of truth. And by the way, in Christian esotericism, the spirit of truth is also called Christ. You guys all know that, right? Anyway, until you reach, the ability to discern truth, at least to investigate truth, and be willing to let go of your preoccupations, your repetitions, and exert, and this is now the important part. If you look at, the qualities, the energetic qualities that come in past truth, which is, or with truth, which is empowerment, the ability to let go, courage, and detachment, this has to do with your will. Until then, you have no own will. Okay, ego is a proxy. It's just something that nature gave you so that you survive your life. Okay, until you develop the self-investigative I. And that then begins to realize, oh, you know, I don't know, I'm making up things, drinking alcohol all day long isn't really a great strategy for life. It creates lots of pain and suffering and for me and all my loved ones, or just going for money or just going for sex or just avoiding life or, just being selfish or, sacrificing myself. Uh, those are all things that I cannot see until here. I cannot see that they are destructive. okay, once I reach truth, it is the I in you, the spiritual identity in you, yeah, that wants to emerge, that says, hey, including, of course, the consequences of your actions, namely that, you have pain, suffering, maybe lose your family, lose your job, lose all your money, and so forth, that show you something isn't adding up. Yeah, whether we call this karma or not is actually not relevant. The full karmic understanding doesn't come until much later, where you realize that that's sort of the higher level of spiritual insurance. Yeah, that's the more advanced spiritual insurance policy, because that's where your higher self makes sure that you actually do progress in this lifetime. Yeah, but let's just understand this correctly here. Okay, so your true self, or your I, I call it true self, but I really am talking about the I, if you want to compare this with other literature. The capital I is not present, until here. And why is it not present? Because you're not actually able to exert your will, or as I called it earlier, conscious choice. So your will is the ability to make a conscious choice. And sometimes that includes having to let go of something, or doing something, detaching, or, mustering all the courage that you have, overcoming your fear, overcoming your pride, blah, blah, blah. You will know the process. So we spent a considerable amount of time here in these, 300s, 200s, 300s, and 400s, because that's where, our heart, more or less, needs to get refined. It needs to get ennobled, okay, to be able to operate in coherence with our mind, with our higher mind, if you will. So we have to go through all of these, you know, phases, if you will, or these are just words, but they actually show processes, yeah, of development, where we begin to understand, yeah, what life is actually about. So you can stop here at truth and already celebrate quite a, like an achievement from a human soul development point of view, because you have, you know, um, started the process of developing your spiritual identity. You have started the process. Yeah. If you stay in your ego for all your life, you never start the process. Earlier, I said living an unconscious life. Living an unconscious life would be to stay in your ego for all your life. There's nothing gained. There's nothing higher that was developed. Julianne, you talked about having your own insights. Yeah, there was nothing created by you. You don't actually, exerted sort of the higher faculties that you're capable of. You just sort of tagged along.
Mm.
But once you do, okay,
It's just like
something
coming
else happens.
it's just like coming to a place of like, oh, the next step.
Yeah, the next step. This is then, this is why I use these three sort of sections here. You know, so you first, this is all the ego stuff that we have to go through, and then this is the stuff that where the actual self-healing work. Yeah, here between truth and heart. Consciousness. Okay, so consciousness always means that your mind is involved in this, so it's conjoined. Yeah, it's unified. So this isn't about feeling more. This is about more consciously feeling. Okay, yeah. So that's why I often send a disclaimer when I talk about heart. I'm not talking about emotions, because that's all lower stuff. That's all ego. Yeah. Emotions, obviously, emotions and feelings play a role in the refinement process of our heart, but on a on a level of self mastery. Okay, so this section here, okay, between truth and heart, this entire section here, yeah, that's the self mastery path. Now, this is overcoming the ego path. Here is self-mastery. Yeah, where you learn to calm yourself down, where you learn to investigate things, where you learn to understand other people's points of view, where you learn patience, where you learn letting go, where you learn acceptance, expansiveness, non-resistance, non-judgment, yeah, allowing, being fully present, yeah, understanding and becoming able to manage your empathy, yeah, and really live a heart-centered life. That's then, sort of the turbo for your conscious development or the development of your I or your spiritual identity. Because as soon as you realize that, the actual quickening of your life and with it, sort of the mastery of, your physical reality has to occur through and with your heart, okay, and that it's actually taking place in there, yeah, then you begin to have a new experience of life. First of all, it's not at all externalized anymore. And you realize that, indeed, spirit is working through you. It's working through you. Whether you call it your higher self or spirit, doesn't really matter because your higher self is fully 100% attuned to spirit. Okay. So in a way, that is spirit, okay, that you're referring to when you're referring to a higher self. Or as I often call it, inner divinity in the Sacred Self-Healing Course. Yeah, so you realize it's, life is not at all happening to you or by you, it's happening through you. And then in the last stage of your human development journey or the soul development journey, you begin to master your reality, your physical reality. Yeah, here's where you ennoble it. This is the self mastery path, and then you begin to actually master your day-to-day reality to a point, and this is then what happens, upward here beyond enlightenment, where your life's experiences and the insights that you've gained, where they're being preserved. Yeah, and this happens through basically the etherization that occurs in your heart, sacred heart furnace in your solar fire in your heart. Okay, that writes these insights and these things that you have ennobled, that you have followed the highest calling, if you will, yeah, and actually lived it, okay, yeah, to the point of a spiritual master, yeah, of masterhood, okay. It writes that via the etherization into the astral. In other words, there's this like a soul repository where when you get reborn, you can actually pick the body that you want to get born into, and you have a recollection of it. Yeah? You know your past lives. You know all the things that you have already mastered, and you continue your journey from there. You don't have to start from scratch. Yeah, you called it undoing, but you're jumping off the wheel of samsara or whatever you want to call this. You liberated from any kind of deterministic forces, yeah, because through this self mastery and then the spiritual initiation, you are forming like a etheric immune system that allows you to go past all these trials and temptations and sufferings of the physical experience. So in essence, what the word or the process, the concept of etherization means is actually building your immortal body. And here at this point, I would like to point out that a lot of people misunderstand this, and especially nowadays. So nowadays, with at the height sort of materialism, everything, and especially spirituality is being materialized. This is an Ahrimanic impulse. It's very clever. It's misunderstood, immortality, and it has been throughout the millennia as the physical immortality. Yeah, it's an ego notion in reality. Not wanting to die. So it's this like millennial old fantasy that be it the fountain of youth or whatever, that could prevent you from having to physically die. Anybody who understands the esoteric reality behind that understands, or must understand, that that's not a good goal. Why would you want to stay in the material forever if your higher faculty, if your higher potential is actually to etherize yourself? Why would you? Yeah, where your physical body basically loosens up, and you're no longer bound to the physical. So I want to really drive this home with you, that any be it a spiritual tradition or teacher or direction of teaching or whatever, that or philosophy, or nowadays technology, that promises the preservation of your physical, is an expression of dark forces, because it really binds you to the physical, which is opposite of what the next step, the next evolutionary step of your soul development is.
Jona, I have a question with this, just a little bit. I don't think it's a big question. Yeah, because maybe it's an energy and the collective. Just recently, I was like, I was supposed to live to like 102 because I'm supposed to do a bunch. There's like a certain thinking of how long I live, because there's certain things I'm supposed to accomplish, or if I live longer, I can accomplish more. But it's almost like more the
I think
idea
that
is,
too. That's my shadow trait. You know that?
well, I think it is like a shadow thing, because it seems very conceptual, and
No,
it doesn't
it's
really. No.
materialistic. No,
Mm.
it really expresses doubt, spiritual doubt, if you think about it. Because you think that all you can accomplish is here in the physical, which is not the case. And it's not bound to
I don't
time.
know. Right. That I understand what you're saying. However, I guess, yeah, maybe I don't understand the whole material thing, because if we're alive here in the material of the earth longer, is it possible that whatever, that's for a reason, but I'm still getting etherized, yet also doing work while I'm asleep?
Yeah.
Like, do I even have control over it? Yes and no. Like, I don't walk out into front of a car, because then then it'll end. But what, I guess it
Well,
comes
just
down
the
to, okay,
physical
what are you
life ends.
following? What is
Yeah.
the guiding factor?
The guiding factor is your everyday consciousness and alignment. Living your life every day in the full awareness that your thoughts, your sentiments, your doings, everything that you basically carry around with you creates an energetic reality. Okay. And the more beautiful, the more loving, the more true your alignment is, yeah, the more beautiful, the more true, and the more loving, okay, your spiritual reality. So what's behind the materialism is that we believe that our life only takes place in the material, which, by the way, contradicts, the belief I'm a soul with a body. Yeah. We have to think these things for ourselves to fully understand them. Okay, we can obviously repeat words, and in the beginning, that's what we do through prayer or mantras, or listening to speakers and courses and so forth. We just sort of assimilate certain things, and take them on as our preliminary truths, and just have to pray that the teacher or the author or whatever or the preacher is, for as long as we're not actually thinking this through ourselves, we just have to blindly trust. Okay, so you know the point of a spirit, discovering that there is a spiritual reality, and saying things like I'm a soul with a body, or I'm a soul that is having a physical experience, is that you become aware of the reality that you live 99.9999% in the spiritual and only 0.00001% of the time in the physical. Does that make sense? Yeah, that your primary being is actually of spiritual nature. You're of spirit. You're a spirit being that is having a temporary physical experience. Therefore, it wouldn't even be logical to think that you have to have a physical experience to get things done. That would nullify 99.99999% of your being. And you just said something, well, maybe things happen when I sleep. Yeah, they do. The spiritual reality of, of the spirit being that is in you is always on. That isn't turned off. Just because you're not conscious of it, that doesn't mean it's not there. And latest, when you study and train energy awareness, you realize that there is a lot going on. Okay,
Yeah,
and
that
the more.
part, I'll at least mention that part. I know. That's why I
Mhm.
even bring it up because I'm like, well,
Mhm.
maybe not maybe like I think about it all day, but I just throw it in there and go. It helps with the acceptance of the whole experience because
Mhm.
we have. I'm sure everybody here, you still have a little bit of the programming of what the life is supposed to be like, what it means, and what the sleep does, and all that kind of thing. When,
Mhm.
like, especially when we start having really appreciated discussions like this and we speak this way, it loosens up those little boundaries about it, and you can just be
Mhm.
honest with ourselves and go, okay, I'm not going to just keep thinking I'm having funny dreams. Like it's so easy to do that because I wake up and faced with some material things to
Mhm.
dismiss it when it's actually needs to be more congruent. Like just
Yeah, but
because
for
your
as long
eyes
as
are
you
shut,
yeah, but
it's
for as
just
long as
a
you're having
different
the physical.
layer of consciousness. It's being aware of it. Those things that happen at night, well, you're aware of whatever we're aware of during the day.
For as long as you're having a physical experience, okay, there's certain mechanisms at play that prevent you from, you know, uh, navigating the spiritual world, because if you could, you would not probably agree to having the goals for the physical experience. Do you know what I mean? So it's like a certain state that you're in when you're living your physical life. So this is very short compared to the lifespan, say, of your soul, which is close to eternity. Do you know what I mean? So uh, everything that you say is and it's naturally so. Yeah. So there's no criticism. Is coming from a standpoint of trying to understand your physical reality. Okay. And it's natural. This is what the ego does. It experiences the physical reality as the only reality, and then gradually discover, oh, there's also a spiritual reality to it. And at first it's scary, and then it becomes interesting, and all these impulses awaken in us and so forth, and we explore, and we train, and we ennoble. Ennoble is a form of a refinement process. We refine, all this, and things become less scary, and much more clear. So the purpose of this advanced spiritual discussion here is, for us to see the bigger picture and to grow beyond, just barely, peeking out of the ego world, okay? But to understand that there is a huge world, yeah, the spiritual world happening within yourself, um, whether you actively participate in it or not, okay? So the goal is to become more conscious of it and more actively participate in it. Why? Participate in it. Why? Because you want to make sure that you freely choose, okay, which kind of life you want to live and what you want to align yourself to. This is an accomplishment, okay? This is one of those collective human um, uh, development milestones, namely that we have a free will. In the old days, where people were less conscious, less educated, and more sort of childlike in their understanding of the spiritual world, it was still very externalized. But since the appearance of the Christ, okay, as sort of a master, just like Buddha and Krishna and so forth, who brought this spirit of truth and free will, the ability to freely choose, as an accomplishment into our human collective. We are here to make that choice, what we align ourselves to. This is a pretty simple thing, Janet, and everybody listening here. It does not require 102 years, okay? But it requires a whole lot of understanding and consciousness. So we back up and go back to part one, or the workshop series that we are doing parallel here, the awakening issues. We can remember perhaps some of the contributing or catalyzing factors in our journey that make us want to investigate the spirit beingness, that make us want to self-heal, that drive us forward, that deliver or provides us with those experiences that are needed for us to gain this level of insight. Do you guys remember what those are? Sorry. Pain and suffering and trauma and karma. Yeah, in part one and two, we spent a considerable amount of time to recontextualize um, those kind of adversarial experiences of the physical life as spiritual tools. So, in a way, you can say that they're not the only tools. There's other tools too, but when it comes to overcoming the ego, it mostly goes through pain and suffering. Sorry, this is going around here. I'm sick for the last week already. Yeah, so your question was, do we need a long life to have sort of impactful or, relevant spiritual insights, right? Yeah. Question was, do I have more insights the longer I
Well,
let?
it wasn't exactly the question. It's part of the question. It's part of the lifespan versus purpose sort of question. Obviously, you're expanding on it further that by re-explaining that our soul is humongous. So it's not all about that. It's really not all about that. Like I think about famous people who died quote unquote early. Did they become more themselves and they lived what they needed to do and their life ended perfectly short? And then I stopped thinking about that because it just starts getting confusing. So I don't think.
No, it's a fair question. It's linear. It refers to the material experience. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah. So the premise of your
yeah,
question is that you
that's
can
all.
only achieve something, while you're alive, which is not the case. I redirected this to like, okay, wait, you're a spirit being that's having a physical experience. So the majority of what is happening and what you are developing here is in the spirit world. It's not in the physical. All right. So more physical is not gonna get you more spiritual.
Well,
Okay.
and part of it too, isn't it? Part of it too, like when you're saying it, is that that's a very externalized view on top of it. Because here we are thinking that if I live 50 years, I'm supposed to be doing all these other things, as opposed to transcending the ego and living in this life as, like you said, things that we can. Uh, oh, I forgot the word. Materialize. That's the only word I can say. Manifest.
Yeah, it's fine.
And
Fine.
also
Yeah.
how we can then serve from that higher consciousness, because that right there then ends the question. It's not like, what am I here to supposed to do? I've done it, and now I'm just walking in my path as me until whatever happens in service and in understanding.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't even talked about service and serving yet. We've just talked
Okay.
about the
Yeah.
individual. Okay. That's another level of, like another quickening, if you will, when you then dedicate your life to service of humanity. Okay. And that's, what happens up here. Okay. Once you're, like, reach that sort of heart mind coherence or the unified heart mind. But Janet, everything you said, like, I'm a little hesitant here because you start the sentence with everything that we're supposed to do. What is it that you think that you're supposed to do? You mean
That's
like
the
transcending
mystery.
your ego? Yeah, I
It's
mean like
just one of those little stinking questions that comes in sometimes. I'm like, okay, I feel like it's a low vibration thing, but it's obviously there. It's just like what you said. It's part of, it must be part of my shadow, that because it definitely is not an obsession. However, I feel like it's still part of the foundation. It's still a brick in the wall of how
yeah, you're here
I
to develop
function.
your free will. You're here to master your free will. Okay,
Right.
and things I'm supposed to do that does not really go together. Think about it.
Yeah, that
Okay,
makes
so
sense, doesn't it? Yeah.
right there is a contradiction, and that's why you can't resolve. Okay, I am showing the process. I'm not saying, oh, and then you're supposed to do this, and then you do need to do this, and then yeah, I'm not saying that. I'm just showing you the process to give you a little bit of a framework so that you better understand your own journey, where you find yourself, and sort of what it is that you're actually going through. Okay. Yeah, so this would be as the same as saying to a 5-year-old, okay, so in a year from now you're going to lose your teeth, and then your body's going to grow, and you're going to double in height and weight and so forth, and then you're going to go through puberty, and then you're going to become an adult. Like that. Those aren't things that the kid is supposed to do. Those are things that will happen without proceeds. They will happen to the child. All this will happen or will, you know, occur within you on a long enough timeline in whatever dimension. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So all this
Yeah.
is basically written in stone as part of, the greater developmental plan. And just because we can't see beyond it, we think that this is all there is. What I'm trying to show you is there's so much bigger. There's so much more. We are on the 10th spiritual hierarchy, the lowest there is. And yet, through that, part of the most powerful beings in this universe. Okay? We are on our journey to basically become gods. Okay? Yeah, as if God is the highest spiritual, or the spirit itself, the highest spiritual hierarchy. Okay? We're like down here, guys. Yeah, down here. Okay? And our next goal, or not goal, but our next sort of natural developmental stage is angelhood. And I know this is hard to process because, all of you guys have so many contradictions about angels and stuff like that. That's because most of you are influenced through Western or Eastern, but mostly Western, live in Christian societies and have these like preoccupations with angels. But if you just look at it from a spiritual point of view, maybe from a vibrational point of view, yeah, it's arbitrary what Hawkins came up with the list of consciousness levels. So he just created a scale from 0 to 1,000. Let's say, if we were talking, that's sort of part of our human experience, yeah, 0 to 1,000. And then after, it's logarithmic, so we would probably say then, at about 10,000, your entire, everything, your entire being changes into an angel. If you've gone through all this. And how does this all relate to etherization? So let's come back to the topic, but these discussions are all very relevant to understand, the question, why should we even etherize? Now, why should we etherize? Okay, why should we, change anything about who we are? Well, the first answer is you don't need to change anything, but there are some inner impulses and there are some outer impulses that are coming in through your lifetime, okay, that ask you, that, show you, that, prompt you to explore, to evolve, to, to grow. We all know what it's like to be in a relationship that doesn't grow. We all know what it's like to be in a job that doesn't grow. We all know what it feels like, to get stuck in your life and not grow. What does that feel like? Who wants to say this in their words? What does it feel like when we don't grow? The inner experience of not growing.
Well, I know recently I've questioned if I was in that kind of spot because I felt like dying a little bit. Like there's different kinds of dyings we have, like ego death and stuff, but it is a certain kind of shriveling, dying feeling.
Mm-hmm. Shriveling, yeah, I like that. Yeah, it's painful. It's painful. The impulse to grow, the impulse to expand, the impulse to, go into your higher expression, as I call it, is so strong in us, okay, that we actually experience it as painful when we don't grow. So there's an inner impulse to grow, the inner impulse to investigate, to understand our journey, to self-heal, to self-master. That's an inner impulse. That's in all of us, guys, in each and every one of us. Some suppress it, with fantasies or narratives or delusions, illusions, or addictions. And some cope with it. But the impulse to grow, to expand, can be felt deep within ourselves. And where you feel this is in your heart. So the only people that don't experience this impulse to grow are people that are disconnected from their heart. So Janet, it's a good sign that you have that feeling. Okay. But it's also a prompting. It's like a reminder. Yeah. So pain is a tool here in this physical experience. It's actually supposed to prevent us from repetition. So Julianne, if you're sick and tired of the repetitions in your life, because you have to go through the same pain over and over again, well, then there is something that you're not following. Yeah? There's something that you're not following. There's something, that you kind of already know, but you're not doing it. And, for that, you just go back to your understanding of yourself and, apply everything that you've learned through, investigating truth. Where am I in an illusion? Where am I in a delusion? Where do I project stuff? Where am I mind controlled? Yeah, where are my thoughts even my own thoughts? Are these thoughts that I'm, expressing? Have I thought them myself? Am I on autopilot, or are these things consciously chosen that I choose? All the choices in my life. Yeah? Then what is my alignment? Do I have primarily loving thoughts, or do I have thoughts of judgment and envy and I don't know, desperation? That's your alignment. That's your worldview. That you have to understand. Your alignment is really the quickening to everything. So no matter what you understand and no matter what you know, okay, it won't help you if your alignment is, of pain and victimhood and fear and anger and pride. Yeah, because that's the turbo. Okay, that's what forms and refines and really structures your spiritual identity. And the more it's formed, the more it's structured, the more immune you become, the less susceptible you become to all the outer influences that you have to contend with in your physical experience. All the way to active self-healing, etc., because you no longer understanding yourself as a victim of a disease. You understand your own involvement in it. Yeah? All the way to recognizing all the outer impulses through the collective, be there darkness or not, with the right alignment, that they don't affect you. Now you have to still contend, you still have to learn to navigate them, but you're not a victim of it anymore. So etherization, which is nothing but the spiritualization of ourselves, which happens through the unified heart mind, in that furnace, that sacred heart within yourself, that brings in moral considerations, that brings in considerations of goodness and truth and expansion and evolution. Yeah, it happens through that, through every single thought, sentiment, every single expression, every single word. Yeah. So it includes your alignment. And as you do this in a conscious manner, your I, all right, and your, the the conglomeration, the holistic you, if you will, that includes your astral, your etheric, your physical, and your consciousness body. All right, they start taking on a new form. They start loosening up. They start becoming less material. So etherization is basically, you can picture that in your head, sort of the opposite of materialization. Yeah? It's loosening up, loosening, unbinding from the material experience. And this happens through the etherization of our blood, which again takes place in the physical heart. It's basically the change of our bioelectrical field, yeah, through or via your inner alignment. The issues and the misconceptions that are around here, and also, the influence of dark forces, as we have defined them, just to bring that into the equation here, happens through. Let me just bring up the Trinity of Darkness here for you. Happens through, on one hand, through the Luciferic, where you are getting pulled into your delusions. This often shows up, it presents as unbridled knowledge. Okay, those are the people that have written all the books and know everything about the, all the manas and all the rays and all the stuff. They know all the words, but have no internal experience. Yeah, basically their temptation here, or their delusion, is that all you need is knowledge. Now, the other extreme, okay, is the materialism that, the madness that comes through that, where, you are basically, um, trying to live forever. You're trying to, live every day as your last day, and um, you regard, technology and so forth as a tool, perhaps. All these movements with, transhumanism movements and colonizing space and so forth are basic Ahrimanic uh, illusions. Okay, so that's basically the binding to the material is the other extreme. So the Luciferic always pulls you out of yourself and makes you lose yourself outside of yourself, and the Ahrimanic always pulls you into yourself and makes you lose yourself in yourself, yeah, including selfishness and rationalism and reductionism and so forth. Yeah, you see this here outlined on the slide. So the truth is, knowledge doesn't do anything for you. It's not enough. Okay, it's the alignment that matters. Okay, and it's the alignment to Christ. And Christ, as an esoteric concept, as you know, has not actually a lot to do with the religion itself, but has to do with how I defined this earlier, with aligning yourself to the spirit of truth and to your sacred heart. Yeah, and all the things that come with it, a lifestyle where you seek the good and the true and the loving in your life. And the highest form of that is obviously to, after you've transcended your ego and your own suffering and so forth, you become, you understand sort of the greatness, the bigness of it all, and you choose, it's the highest form of alignment. You choose, to be of service. Yeah, so serving and being of service, is basically the highest form of embodying your higher alignment. Lower alignment, which is the selfishness and the materialism, but also the delusions, the Luciferic stuff, the fantasy world, and the the projections and the avoidance and idealization and escape. Um, you know, um, those lead to both, lead to devolution. So that's where I want to stop today, as far as the just transfer of knowledge is concerned, because we want to investigate in part 6 what actually happens. Yeah. So to fully understand this, just one thing. I didn't get to do a slide for that. I'm going to do this till next time. Um, to fully understand etherization, you got to understand, how the etheric, the astral, and the physical intertwine, and how your consciousness, your I, your spiritual identity, then forms. So it forms as a result of these different realms within you conjoining. So the first part of our spiritual journey is always, learning to deal with your physical body and the lower etheric stuff, which is your lower chakras. Yeah, like the desires and the addictions and safety and security and basic belonging and selfishness. So that's your lower chakra stuff, which we practice in the Great Sacral Heart Fusion. And then once you actually pull all that into your heart and you strengthen, this sort of sacred heart fire in you, what happens is that you awaken to, you consciously awaken to, your higher etheric and astral realms within yourself that are then starting to intertwine, represented through your higher, not higher, but upper chakras, where it's about expression and the ability to see truth and the ability to tune into the spiritual world, to the spiritual consciousness. And really, the main message here is that these two processes, which can be seen as alchemical processes, they need to conjoin, they need to unify in our heart. Yeah, and that is then when your ether body begins to form or begins to penetrate the astral realm. And when that happens, guys, you are basically no longer bound to the material in your future lives. And this is then how the resurrection body, or the immortal body, or ascension body, if you will, how it's formed. So, you don't lose yourself when you die. See, when you die, yeah, your physical dies, and then, in the process of like 3 days, your etheric starts to dissolve, and there's a sort of a metabolizing and processing that occurs, where only the things that are basically useful for your soul development get transferred into your astral body, and that's usually not much. It's just a tiny little tidbits, because every life that you live, has, if you just live your life in your ego, okay, there's sort of a minimum level of growth that occurs, even if you just collect experiences, if you will. But when you have a glorified ether body, when you have a resurrection body, it's different, because you already live your life, you already embody your life as your conscious self, which means that all that that you have learned and gained as your own spiritual insights, gets preserved. That's what true mortality in the esoteric sense actually means. So the goal is not to stay alive forever. The goal is to no longer have to need the physical experience, yeah, and basically to form your own spirit being in the astral via your etheric. So your etheric is the only one that can actually record physical experiences. It's the mediator between the astral and the physical. And so it's necessary for your soul to gain those physical experiences and, basically write them into your astral through your ether body, through your etheric self, to continue on its journey through the spiritual hierarchies. And the more conscious your life is, the more aligned you are to all these. That's why a little bit of study and knowledge actually helps us to understand the magnitude of all of this, and learning about the afterlife. There's a reason why 70-80% of all spiritual teachings at all times in human development are about the afterlife, and not just how to make that transition more easy and more smooth, but also how to preserve, all the things that you've gained through this lifetime. Yeah, so I'm not saying that you need to etherize and that's what you're supposed to do. That's not what I'm saying. Okay, I'm saying it's going to happen with or without you, but let me correct myself here. It can't really happen without you. You have to be aware, of your alignment, not so much of what happens there on an alchemical level, but you're not aware of what happens on the biochemical level with your everyday ins and outs of physical life either, and yet you still live, you're still, your body functions. It does that without you, okay? But the more conscious you become of it, the more supportive and the more coherent everything becomes. You become an active participant in this. And that always works like a turbo. It's more powerful. Yeah. But my motivation here is mostly to show the magnitude of all this and why at a certain point in your spiritual development it's necessary to further educate yourself on all these things. So, don't ever take anything that I introduce to you here as a given, or that this is how it is. On the contrary, we are here to develop, refine, and ennoble our free will, because at the end of the day, you have to choose your light. Okay, you have to choose it, and nobody else does that. So for as long as you believe that there's some kind of higher power that judges you and determines whether you get into heaven or hell, okay, you still have an externalized life view. Okay, and that prevents conscious will. Okay. Now, for as long as you believe that consuming spiritual knowledge is going to get you there, you're in a delusion. And for as long as you believe that all this spiritual blah blah is a bunch of BS, and how's that going to help you in your physical life? All that matters is your physical life. Then you're also in an error here, because these things are part of our experience, and at least for this community, it's a given. We can all experience this ourselves. So, yeah, all I can say is enjoy the ride, and make every choice a conscious choice. Because every thought, every sentiment, every deed, every word, every action creates a spiritual reality, an energetic reality. That determines the quality of your life, that determines the quality of your ether body, that determines the quality of your body, your physical body, your emotions, and your thoughts, and also your beliefs. So, knowing that and already having the experience of that most of you have, this is supposed to assist you in understanding better what to focus on. And not get lost either inside of you and your sufferings, or outside of you. that further hinders you to be an active participant in your choosing. Thank you so much, especially to those of you who shared here, who helped to rephrase things and in this way contributed for everyone who's watching this or who's here live to see it from different angles, to understand it through different words. This is always not just welcome, but also very, very helpful. All right, in that, in your sharing, and your asking questions, and your commenting, yeah, provided that it's on topic, you are actually serving, the same task that I'm trying to fulfill here, which is to assist you navigate your spiritual reality. Okay, guys. Thank you so much for coming. I am looking forward to part 6, in which we're going to discuss Jared's burning questions. What about all these soulless people? And is there a zombie apocalypse that we have to be worried about? And what actually happens when a person refuses or rejects um, the spiritual growth, the spiritual evolution process, yeah, and devolves. Yeah, so a little dive into the underworld, and with that, then, unless you have so many questions that it takes too many hours to get through, we should be able to conclude this workshop series, Electrification and Etherization, because electrification is basically the opposite of etherization. It's the binding to the material. All right, so enough said. I'm looking forward to our next workshop, which is going to be in July. And thank you, everyone. Check in with the Energy Training Club. That's something for the serious spiritual seeker. It's not enough to just listen to YouTube videos or workshops, and that you have to actually engage in the internal experience. You can do this through your own spiritual routines, prayer, meditation, and so forth. But there's a whole nother level to it when you do this with multiple people that are aligned in the same way. Life, yeah, that's a whole nother level of inner experience, and I can promise you that that is. Bye bye.